Mr. Vikram Nair.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise in support of the budget. This budget is unique in a few respects, but I think the most important is that this is a budget not just for the year ahead, but one which deals with the next 10 years. And not only that, but which is quite upfront about some of the bad news for the next 10 years. So I think it's a very straightforward budget. But I think the most important part of it is the message. And the message is one of optimism, that Singapore is ready for the decade ahead, notwithstanding the challenges we face. But I also think there is a risk that in this budget, people may take sometimes perhaps too much comfort. And I think it's also important for people to realize what some of the important changes mean and what impact this will have on them. I think the Minister rightfully identified the 3 mega trends that will shape the future, including the move towards Asia, automation, and I think herein lies opportunities, but the biggest challenge is the third, our demographic challenge. So how do all these things interplay? I mean, first of all, of course, if this vision succeeds, we will have a vibrant, innovative economy, and we will have a smart, green, and livable city, which sounds very nice. But that is the picture of success. If we fail, of course, the consequences could be dire. The opportunities could move to other parts of Asia. In fact, what you see in places like the European Union, for example, is opportunities move to the developing parts of that union. So there is a chance that even though there is a move towards Asia, we may lose those opportunities because we're less competitive than other parts of Asia. We may lose opportunities to countries that are cheaper, but which can still produce better value than us. So if we fail, there is a chance that Singapore could be irrelevant. So we have to succeed. We have to find a way to succeed. But even if we succeed, the path will not always be smooth sailing. And I think it's important for individuals and companies to recognize that they have an important part themselves in this process. The government can lay the foundation. It can create opportunities for workers to improve their skills. It can also create opportunities for businesses to improve, to digitize. And these are all gentle nudges. But ultimately, the people who will benefit from doing so are the workers and the businesses themselves. Now, even if a business succeeds in digitizing, and even if a worker succeeds in picking up skills, it's important for both businesses and workers to realize that this success is not permanent, nor is it guaranteed to last. Business cycles are very short, so the business that may be successful today may not be successful in a few years' time. Even if we look at just the last 15 years, I mean, 15 years ago, at the turn of this new millennium, some of the most successful companies were in the tech sector. And everyone thought back in 1999 and 2000 that tech was the way to go. The NASDAQ valuations of many companies exceeded even the main board-listed New York Stock Exchange companies. But that was a very short cycle at that time. It lasted maybe 2 or 3 years before the dot-com bubble burst. And many people who had invested in picking up the skills to succeed in that environment were all of a sudden jobless. And this is the reality of the new market. And this cycle has repeated many times over, even in the last 10 years. Shortly after that, in 2004 onwards, a commodity megacycle started. So suddenly, oil prices started rising, commodity prices started rising, and everyone thought that commodity, oil and gas, this was the way to go. Massive investments took place in this sector, but in the last 3 or 4 years, this sector has had a big pullback as well. So a lot of the investment in that sector will be wasted. There will be distressed assets going out, and this is the reality of the future economy. So even if workers pick up the skills, even if businesses adapt, they must understand that success is not permanent. What works this year may not even work in the next year. And therefore, it is very important to be nimble. The fact that you've picked up a skill and that skill has paid off for a few years is a good thing. The fact that it doesn't pay off for a lifetime is to be expected. And I think this is the reality of the future that we're going to live in. This is what will happen even if we succeed in having a vibrant and innovative economy. The nuts and bolts of being vibrant and innovative is the reality that you or your business could become irrelevant very soon because someone else has come up with an innovation that makes you irrelevant. For countries and big economies that have invested heavily in one area, one sector, For example, the Scandinavian countries back in the days of Nokia and Ericsson, they've also paid a heavy price when those sectors subsequently pulled back, when the iPhone, for example, came and took the mobile phone market away. So the reality about a globalized economy is that no matter how hard you work, the reality is that your rice bowl can be stolen at any time. So even if we succeed, I think it's important for individuals and businesses to know that things may happen beyond your control that will change the playing field dynamically. And while the government can enable you to pick up new skills, even in that situation, it is normal for this to happen, and you have to be able to adapt to that. Now, related to this, I think, is the second important thing that I think government can do, and this is, I think, part of the budget in being a caring and cohesive society. And I think there are two underlying threads in this. On the one hand, of course, the government is saying that we will try and be there as a safety net. For those who have low income, there will be social transfers to help. Education is still of fundamental importance, right? And education is now being provided at an even earlier stage. It's even extending to the preschool sector. So if we start enabling education at an earlier age, that will hopefully reduce the risk of inequalities, even at the time people enter primary one. And all this is necessary. If one studied the Greek wisdom, Plato's Republic, they said in the ideal republic, all children will be taken away from their parents and put into institutions so that everyone has an equal footing. Now, of course, that is theoretical. It is unlikely to happen in practice. So that is why, I don't think any parent wants their children taken away. But the reality is the more you equalize the educational playing field, the better you are to have at least equality in that starting point. And I think this budget is making important steps in that respect. Free, accessible primary one education was the best way to do it 30, 40 years ago. Now we've gone even further. More than that, I think the second part that is important, I think, is also the sense of social responsibility. And I think there are gentle nudges in this respect in terms of encouraging charitable and community work and encouraging community participation. But I think it's important for people who succeed to also realize that their success is not just because of their own efforts or their own abilities, but also because of the environment they lived in, and also because of luck. I mean, with the dynamism in the modern economy, the line between success and failure is sometimes not easy to identify. Good people may fail, notwithstanding the best of efforts. People may succeed one year and fail the next. So I think it's important for people to realize when they succeed that that is a time to be generous and to give back. And I think this sense of responsibility is something the successful have to understand and accept. And I think that is probably going to be the key for being a truly caring society. When you succeed, you must understand that it was not you alone, and it's time for me to give back. And when that success disappears, maybe someone else will be kind to you at a time when you need it. And I think this is the core of a caring and cohesive society. But we must realize that our success is not our own, and our misery is not always someone else's fault. So we must take responsibility for our success, but at the same time be gracious when we succeed. Let me also address the final aspect of the budget, which I'm heartened by, and that is the fiscal sustainability. Because one of the things that I think many of us worry about is with the aging population, with a shrinking workforce, how are we going to actually balance the increasing social spending needs? Now, we've been blessed to have had a very generous amount in reserves, and we've been able to use a fair bit of this through the net investment returns framework. Now, the big question is, will this be sustainable, and if so, for how long? And I'm grateful the finance minister has actually put forward a plan, and to me, a fairly reasonable plan to explain how this can be made sustainable. I think many of us were anticipating a rise in taxes, and it's good to know up front that the anticipated rise is 2% in GST, plus a few other taxes on cigarettes, carbon, and other areas. And it's good, I think, for us to understand that this is going to be the cost to be sustainable for, say, the next 10 years, at least up to 2025. Of course, these things are dynamic, but it's good to know that this is what we have to prepare for. Now, a tax increase is never popular. It is never an easy thing to do. And of course, I think it's natural for there to be some pushback and for people to say, why don't we look at some alternatives? I think the Workers' Party has suggested using land sales revenues up front. I think my colleague, Ms. Libiwa, has addressed this. But I should add, I won't laugh this suggestion out because I think previously, I had considered this myself at one point. But I agree fundamentally that it is wrong in principle to sell land and spend that capital up front. Some other countries do it, but I don't think that's a reason for us to follow suit. I think it's more responsible for us to put the revenue for land sales or anything we get into the reserves and use any income we have from that. Because ultimately, land is an asset. And I think, as some speakers have said, it is our most finite asset. So the best we can do is treat it as an asset even after it's sold. And if there's income, then we can use that as part of the NIR framework. So in that sense, I think, all this, goes towards making sure that we have a financially sustainable budget. I think all our expenses should be paid for with our annual operating revenues. If there are investments in long-term infrastructure, then of course for this we can use hybrid models, including perhaps borrowing to be paid for with future income from that investment. All these are financially sustainable ways, and I think that is probably what the next generation will be most comforted by, that we will do our best to improve Singapore, to create opportunities in Singapore, to make it a place where they and their children will have opportunities. Now, even if we succeed, there will be people who will have difficulties, and I think it's important for us to be generous in that respect with both ourselves as well as the government, and to make sure that these people have a chance to get back up again. But I think that is the best we can do. I think we've had many analogies from different people on pushing the car so that it runs on its own, as well as a trampoline. But I think these are all important analogies to let our people know what the real message is, that ultimately it's for you to be self-sufficient and to sustain yourself, but there are people there to give you a hand when you're down. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'll conclude with a few words in Tamil. இது ஒரு முக்கியமான பட்ஜெட். அடுத்த ஆண்டுக்கு திட்டம் இதுவதற்கு மேலாக அடுத்த 10 ஆண்டுகளுக்கு அப்பாலும் திட்டமிடுகிறது. உலகம் துரிதமாக மாறி வருவதுடன் சிங்கப்பூரும் மாறி வருகிறது. தான் இயக்க இயந்திரங்கள் வேலைகளின் தன்மையை மாற்றிவிடும். நம் தொழில்களும் ஊழியர்களும் தங்களை மாற்றியமைத்து கொள்விட்டால் வேலைகளுக்கும் வாய்ப்புகளுக்கும் வேறு இடத்திற்கு சென்றுவிடும். ஆகவே கிடைக்கும் வாய்ப்புகளை சாதகமாக பயன்படுத்தி கொண்டு காலத்திற்கு ஈடு கொடுத்து முன்னேறுவது நமது தொழில்களுக்கும் ஊழியர்களுக்கும் முக்கியமாகிறது. சிங்கப்பூரும் மாற வருகிறது. பெரிய மாற்றம் மக்கள் தொகை மாற்றமாகும். நமது மக்கள் முதுமை அடையும் போது வேலை செய்யும் மக்கள் தொகை குறையும். உள்கட்டமையும் மீது செலவு செய்வதற்கும் அதிக அளவிலான தேவையும் இருக்கும். பழைய உள்கட்டமைப்புகள் பதிப்புக்கும் பதியவற்றை கட்டவும் தேவைக்கும். அதன் மூலம் சிங்கப்பூர் தொடர்ந்து முன்னேற்றப்படையும். இவை நிகழ்ச்சான்று பெறும் தேவைகள் ஆகும். இருந்தாலும் இந்த பட்ஜெட் நமக்கு நம்பிக்கை தருகிறது. ஏனென்றால் இந்த மக்கள் தொகை மாற்றத்தை கையாள்வதற்கான அரசாங்கத்தின் திட்டத்தை அது காட்டுகின்றது. அதில் ஜிஎஸ்டி உட்பட வரி அதிகரிப்புகள் அடங்குவதுடன் உள்கட்டமைப்புகளும் செலவிட புதிய வகையான வருவாய்களையும் பார்க்கிறது. இந்த பட்ஜெட் வரக்கூடிய 10 ஆண்டுகளுக்கும் அப்பால் உள்ள நீண்ட கால சவால்களை கையாள்வதற்கான திட்டத்தை முன்வைக்கிறது. இந்த சவால்களை சமாளிப்பதற்காக சிங்கப்பூருக்கு அது உதவுவதோடு தொடர்ந்து சிங்கப்பூர் சிறப்பு இடமாகவும் இருக்க செய்யும். மன்ற நாயகரே, இந்த பட்ஜெட் நான் ஆதரிக்கிறேன். நன்றி.